Welcome everyone. I'm Erin Hunter, senior editor here at Live Long Media, and we're here for another conversation about the science, strategies, and philosophies about living a longer, happier, and healthy life. Now, I'm really excited today to welcome Ella Davar. She is a dietitian, expert in gut health, and the creator of the Gut Brain Method. She is also serving as the president of the Global Longevity Association, as well as being a published author among her many, many accolades. So I'm so excited to talk about gut health today because gut health is the key and it's a cornerstone to so much of health. So, Ella, thank you so much for being here, and I'm so excited to dive in.
Hi, Erin. Thank you for having me. Yes, gut health is no longer optional, it's fundamental. And I'm so excited to share more details.
So, if this is gonna come off as like so straightforward, and I'm okay with that. In one sentence, if you could wrap up the function of our guts, why
Mm.
does it exist? What would you say it is, and why does it matter for our health?
Well, there's a saying that your gut is your second brain, which is actually somewhat true. And in different ancient philosophies, they even call it like your first brain, because before it gets to your actual brain, everything that you consume, everything you put in your mouth, it gets into your intestines first in your gut. And only when it's successfully absorbed, digested, fermented, only after that processes it gets in everywhere else, into every organ, including your brain. And so for really the science is catching up finally that this is where it all originates from, and this is where disease and inflammation start, and therefore we have the control over what happens in our system. And you've heard probably everything, you are what you eat, and it's actually true. And there's a lot of processes that go on, but everything that we eat, everything that we consume affects our gut health before it affects anything else in our body.
So, I'm so excited to dive into this, particularly because of one point you just mentioned, which is inflammation.
Yes.
So, that seems to be a common root of a lot of disease
Yeah.
and dysbiosis or other maladies that happen in the body. So, why is food such an important factor for creating imbalances in our body, which can lead to so many things like joint pain and diabetes, like from everything? Why does the gut play a role? I would love to talk about that.
Everyone these days is a nutritionist because we all love to eat good food and we all have preferences. We also have emotional attachment to like the memories of our childhood, the foods that we love eating, or the community, right? The Thanksgiving and like the gathering, the Shabbat dinners that we gather around. So we all have opinions around food. And now with the rise of information and the knowledge, it's so like accessible. Everyone has practical and almost scientific opinion about it. And it's true. That's why like it's such a interesting topic. Like when you're trying to tell someone what to eat, like from the functionality perspective, they always argue with like the emotional perspective. And then you're like, well, we're speaking different languages here. But the truth is food does matter. And that's hard to argue. But everything we eat and the system in our like the food system and agricultural system in our country is kind of like is playing against us, if you could say so. The chemicals that are being added, the additives, and our system is not designed to digest all those chemical additives. So we have to actually take control of what we consume, and most importantly, the quality of the consumption. It's like very often, like I love the research by Michael Pollan where he says like eat food, real food, not too much. So he basically says eat the cake, eat the French fries, but make it yourself. How often are you going to make the cake and the French fries on your own, right? But if you were to make it, it's probably going to be like no more than once a month on a special occasion. And that's what creates a difference. But when it comes to functional food and like the healthy eating, it does affect our well-being because the inflammation, what you just said. Inflammation is the process where our body is trying to protect us from harmful chemicals that we are ingesting or consuming. and they are everywhere. Like all of those foods that I mentioned that are either chemically treated or been treated with pesticides or produced in industrial organizations, those are not designed for health, unfortunately, and our body is struggling to digest those, and that's what creates what's called low-grade chronic inflammation. And there are biomarkers that now we can measure to check how your gut is responding to certain foods that you're eating. And one of them is the IgA. That's what we measure at the gut brain. When we work one-on-one, we measure your condition of the organ itself. When inflammation starts, it's an inflammatory response of your immune system to what's going on, and it starts very slowly and it lasts for years. And this low-grade chronic inflammation, that's what creates issues. You know, you've heard people saying, like, as you get older, your metabolism slows down. But what we say is when you take care of things, they last, right? So now we have access to so much information, and we could really see how, if we take care of things and we prevent the low-grade inflammation, which is possible, we prevent aging.
What's so difficult is that a lot of the experts out there nowadays are saying, oh, well, this food's inflammatory, but this food isn't, but this chemical is, but this isn't. And so I don't know if anyone else is like me, but I get kind of confused with what's considered healthy anymore because someone will say a tomato's bad for me, but in Italy, in the blue zones, they've been eating tomatoes for millennia. And so, can you break down like why there's so much controversy around the foods that are inflammatory?
Well, there's like scientifically speaking, there are no
Mhm.
controversies. It's very straightforward. Everything that's created by nature is anti-inflammatory. Everything that's been treated chemically or that packaged that with added chemicals for preservatives or for extending the shelf life, that's what creates inflammation because it's not naturally occurring in the nature this way. But what you're referring to is the advanced nutritional guidance that we're getting from social media these days about these anti-nutrients in the vegetables. And to be honest with you, that's a very personalized approach. That's why one of the first books I wrote after my culinary book, it's called A Utarian Diet, because I specialize in personalized nutrition advice. And there are people that are sensitive to different proteins from different vegetables, like nightshades or even like in herbs, and they have what's called food intolerances and food sensitivities. That's when your body is triggering autoimmune system based on like the certain proteins that is, it's a lesser response than allergies. It's a different antibodies that are being triggered. You know, when you have allergy, you know right away the onset of symptoms is immediate, right? But with the food sensitivities intolerance, it's a delayed onset of symptoms. And there's different foods like gluten, dairy, and even fruits and vegetables, but mostly protein-rich foods or like nuts and seeds that could trigger autoimmunity. But nowadays, it's like, oh my God, like I used to have a clinic. I diagnose with people food sensitivities and intolerance, but statistically, there's only maybe 2 or 3 or 5 people out of 100 that I've tested have those. But because social media is so trendy and people are constantly searching for the new diet advice, for the new quick fix, that's how it's suddenly people are afraid of fruit. People are afraid of eggplant and tomatoes that you've mentioned. But in reality, for most people, it's not. And same thing for dairy. For example, I eat a lot of animal proteins and a lot of vegetables, right? But I don't eat a lot of cow's dairy. I prefer goats and ship's milk. That's what I recommend to my clients because it's less inflammatory for most people. But there are some lucky people that can digest cow's dairy. I'm not one of them, unfortunately. I'm very jealous of those who can, but guess what? They should not be giving advice other people that what we should be having because it's really personalized. That's what I promote is knowledge. I always say invest your time, energy, and money into getting to know your hardworking body and the nourishment that your body thrives on. And with that, like close this fundamental need for your body for nourishment, and just don't even like ask other people. There's no longer, and the information should always comes from inside out. Instead of if you're constantly searching outside, it's always like, I heard that, I read that, this person said that. It's too much information coming at you. And it's almost like, wait, how do I relate? Are these people speaking to me or somebody else, right? So I educate my clients of getting information inside out. This way you have the empowerment, the peace, and clarity to do exactly what's right for you and your family, and let everyone else do their thing.
So, thank you so much for explaining that and talking about things to look out for and looking at you, as you said, looking internally. Um, when someone looks at themselves, if I'm assessing my current state of health and I want to get better, let's say I want to feel better, what are some of the symptoms I should look out for if my body is inflamed right now or like if my gut is in a dysbiosis? How does that manifest in my body and in everyone's body?
Yeah, there are certain symptoms that most people live with and they don't even realize that they have imbalances. So things like ear infections or nasal congestions, like nasal drainage, yes, or skin issues or hair issues or like hair loss. All of this is a startup imbalance, yes. And it starts, our gut is triggered by a few things, and nutrition is one of them. Stress is second. That's what we've created the gut brain method because it's tightly connected. Our nervous system and our digestive system is very tightly connected through vagus nerve. You probably knew this by now. But and continue with the symptoms. Yeah, everything related to skin issues is directly correlated with what's going on in your gut
So
because
does
you're,
that mean like even wrinkles? So
yeah.
like aging, that could actually be my gut?
I mean, no, it's not in your gut. Your skin is also exposed to a lot, right? And through years, it's part of the aging process as we lose the collagen buildup. But wrinkles can be prevented, but with the same amino acids and collagen intake, and that's what a lot of people are proving now. And that's what I actually was convinced when I was sitting next to Mark Hyman, and he's like in his 60s, and I looked at his face. I'm like, whatever he's doing, I should be doing too. So I was not convinced with collagen for a long time until I was. But wrinkles is part of it. But collagen buildup is definitely something that we now have control over. And I'm a huge fan of collagen intake these days for gut health and for skin health.
So, in terms of other symptoms, I would love to talk about one of the biggest ones I experience personally, I'll be honest, and maybe other people do too, which is bloating
Yeah.
and
Everything related to
indigestion
that.
in some
Yeah.
capacity.
Yeah.
So, why does that happen? And why, even let's say you're eating a healthy diet with fiber, let's say you're eating good broccoli
Yeah.
or legumes, nuts and seeds, all these good things. Why is my body and my gut still being like, nope, I'm still gonna puff out like I'm looking 5 months pregnant. Like, why does that happen?
Many reasons, but let's try to summarize. Bloating, very common these days, especially with the younger population group, but there are a few reasons. One of them is nutrition, the amount of fiber and the types of fiber, especially when we're introducing a lot of them. If it's like a whole bowl of raw salad, that's a little much. I only recommend raw vegetables and raw salads for lunch only. For dinner, for women, I only recommend cooked, warm, or what I call temperature treated vegetables and proteins. Also, the amount of it. Half of your plate should be vegetables. The other half of your plate should be proteins and healthy fats and healthy carbohydrates. So the fiber is very important, but it shouldn't be the entire bowl. Some of the salad bowls are gigantic. That could cause bloating. Also, a certain bacteria overgrowth, methane producing over bacteria produce this gas and the types of feeling that makes you feel bloated. That's part of the dysbiosis. That's an overgrowth of bad bacteria versus good bacteria. That's often treated with either probiotics or some herbal treatments that I don't usually recommend on social media until we diagnose someone with dysbiosis. Probiotics could quickly fix it, but I usually recommend natural fermented foods like fermented vegetables, fermented tea, fermented dairy. My favorite is goat's and ship's milk dairy, and also fermented sauerkraut and fermented beets and pickles, the ones that are made without vinegar. So all of that on the long term, but you have to be very consistent with that, creates a lesser bloating. But the other aspect that I have to always mention is stress. Very often, like when we are
Oh.
having also this low grade anxiety and stress, what happens is shallow breathing. And with that also, it affects our diaphragm, and that's like how the way we breathe, and it all creates this sort of an imbalance, which eventually leads to not to directly to bloating, it leads to overgrowth of bad bacteria that's taking over.
So, two things I'm curious about. One, why would raw veggies be more bloating than cooked veggies? So you're only recommending it at lunch.
Yeah.
So for, that's
Fiber. The fiber. So the fiber is undigested content of the vegetable is fiber is hard to digest, but totally possible. It shouldn't, that's not what it means. What it means is that your body is actually fermenting all that fiber to be able to break it down, digest it, and absorb it, right? And that's what feeds what's called a prebiotic. It feeds healthy bacteria, but very often it creates gas. It creates this like byproduct of fermentation, which I don't know if you've ever fermented anything. It creates gas, like anything either yeast or fermented vegetables. It creates gas, and when it's too much of it, that's what creates bloating. And that's why the raw vegetables, the harder it is to digest, the more fiber it has, the more potential it has that it's you're going to bloat you, but not right away. That's why I recommend in small amounts. If someone, for example, I work with a lot of Palm Beach residents, they don't like any fiber. They don't like at all. And their yes, and their argument is that it makes me bloated, it makes me fart. Like I'm not eating any of that. And I always tell them like little bit. So at first, when you're introducing fiber, that's what happens. But at first, like in small amounts, you have to introduce it little by little. And then
because
eventually it gets better.
that's the, as you just said, so it's the remedy, but it's also the cause, the problem,
Yes.
especially for tender guts that don't
Yes.
experience.
Sensitive guts. That's right. You said that, the sensitive gut. And then you have to check sometimes like if you change the fiber of the depending like which fiber, right? If it's like just like celery, radishes, or and this biosis, it's constantly changing. If you like depending on what you eat, if you've traveled, if you were exposed to more stress, it gets triggered, it gets inflamed, it gets irritated. But once you go back to your regular routine, your regular home, and yoga and naturally everything. And also bloating relates to hormones. The last thing that I didn't mention, which for women, when we're experiencing PMS, during luteal phase of our cycle, it's only natural. And in my book, I actually say I work with a lot of models, and even models have a special genes for that week, which is one size bigger, and it's totally fine. You deserve to feel beautiful. You don't have to fit into the same size of jeans all, every day throughout your cycle. That week, you deserve to feel beautiful and like one size bigger jean size.
So that is such an interesting perspective
Yeah.
because
I
I
learned it
feel
from
like
models. I learned that from models. They don't even want to feel bad about like being bloated. It's like just grab a bigger size jeans and it's fine.
I think there's definitely a narrative out there that health has to be a static thing. But
Yeah.
as you're saying, even on a daily basis, your gut is going to change depending on if you eat a certain food and if you travel, and there are other variables. So maybe it's not realistic to look at your gut as like this one ultimate goal of a
Yeah.
healthy gut, but it's a shifting definition of what.
I love what you just said. And I say, like, the only static that has to be is your mindset of that you are doing great, you're doing your best, you're putting in all the effort to do this, and you deserve to feel good. Like with this whole like self-shaming, that's why the gut-brain method includes a lot of mindfulness techniques. A part of our methodology is hypnosis and theta healing and body scanning meditations to help my clients to get rid of this negative self-talk. Very often when they end up in my clinic, they talk in such bad terms about themselves that I have to stop them and be like, this is my client you're talking about. You can't be body shaming. It's not okay to talk to yourself like that. Like I can't even hear that.
That's such a relevant point because yeah, I think a lot of people, and especially women, go through that too. And we all want to look good and we all want to feel good. And I think if sometimes you're struggling in a moment and like you want the better gut health, you want to feel better, I think there's a whole thing that, oh, maybe if I'm mean to myself, I'll get there faster. And it's like, no, but
You
we
can't
fall for
hate
it.
yourself into a version that you're going to love. I always said that. And no matter how much broccoli you eat, if you hate your life, you'll never be happy. So the mindset is starting now. Yes, it's like how you want to feel starts now. And that's why we address stress in addition to nutrition and lifestyle. Because very often, like stress these days is celebrated. Like if you don't have ambition, if you don't have stress in your life, what are you doing with your life, right? But for women, I feel like, we go through so much with the hormonal changes throughout the week. At least what we could do, like you said, the only static and the only constant thing should be is our positive mindset and our the way we view ourselves.
Thank you so much for sharing. Like, that's just fabulous. And it makes me think about longevity as a whole, right? Because
Yes.
obviously we write for a longevity publication,
Yes.
and you are very into longevity.
Yeah.
You host these things called longevity lunches, you
Yeah.
think longer term, and I wanna know more about why I need to care about my gut, not only for my current health, but for my longevity.
Yeah. Well, so what we've done is systemize the knowledge of gut health. There's a lot of different things. Dysbiosis and inflammation are just two aspects of what creates an optimal gut health. There are also metabolites. Our gut metabolites certain nutrients and creates vitamin K. It creates short chain fatty acids, essential for mitochondrial health and optimal metabolism. Also, our gut is responsible for digestion, breaking down nutrients, and enzymatic sufficiency, which most people take it for granted. We somehow assume it's supposed to do its job on its own. Somehow, nobody needs to care about that. But we do, and very often, when people get older during menopause, I diagnose them with the enzymatic insufficiency, and just taking enzymes creates a whole different approach and the feel for women, especially those who are constipated. Yes, I don't recommend anyone just grabbing any enzymes. There's pancreatic enzymes, there's different types, but that's part of the diagnostics that we do. And the last thing that we do are infections. There are fungi, there are yeast and parasites. And very often those infections create nagging symptoms, specifically related to psoriasis and eczema. And so that's what we also are able to treat. And like for like when you say longevity, yes, so all of this like five aspects that I just mentioned, digestion, infections, dysbiosis, microbiome, and inflammation, it's all originated from the gut. And before it gets anywhere else, to your liver, to your heart, to your brain, that's right. If your gut is not absorbing all those beautiful nutrients that you're investing tons of money in buying, that's a problem, and that's what we're trying to create the difference. But overall, for longevity, what you said is like it's the feeling, right? All those nagging symptoms. What people do is harming themselves even more with taking antibiotics or like not addressing the root cause or trying to cover it up with over-the-counter medications or different treatments that are not really healing the root cause of it. And for us, what we're seeing is, the longevity science now indicates it's a lifestyle, right? It's an approach to the way you sleep, the way you exercise, what you eat, and also the community and the people you surround yourself with. And that's what we're trying to teach our clients, this holistic approach and starting with the root cause, with the lifestyle. Because, I mean, supplements are great, right? It plays a huge role, but the lifestyle, the very fundamentals of creating a healthier chances for longevity starts with that.
And when it comes to lifestyle, are there things we can start doing even now that are going to help that are approachable before we jump into getting overwhelmed with, oh my God, I have to fix everything. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. What can we do, just little things now that you notice actually can make a difference in our gut health and thereby our sleep and all these other aspects of longevity?
Yeah. Fall in love with the food that loves you back. That's the title of my TED Talk. But really finding those foods that love your body. For example, bitter herbs love and bitter greens love your liver and your enzymes. And then healthy proteins love your hormones and your muscles, right? And then the same thing with colorful vegetables, the phytonutrients, the antioxidants, the berries, all of these things. And you'll be surprised, like people don't eat enough of those. I tell my clients, eat your berries like it's your job every day for dessert, for a snack, for breakfast topping. And same thing for vegetables, at least once a day. Make sure you eat your green leaf vegetables. If you skipped your breakfast and had like pasta or sandwich for lunch and you're thinking what's for dinner, you know your answer. You haven't had your green leaf vegetables today because that's what your liver and your gut thrives on. Same thing with fibers like lentils and beans, all those superfoods. I tell my clients at least 3 to 4 times a week, and like I'm a dietitian, I cook most of my meals myself. But when I go out to the restaurants, I teach my clients how to dine out. Like always look for foods that you don't make at home often enough, like sunchokes, artichokes, mushrooms, or all these like fancy vegetables like endive. Sometimes I don't bring them into my like us. What's my favorite in Greek restaurants? I teach my clients horta. You know what's horta? Horta.
No, I don't know what horta is.
It's boiled dandelion greens, and you can find them at every Greek restaurant. Dandelion is incredible for liver detoxification process and for your enzymatic sufficiency. Yes, and like yes, that's what my clients are now eating because like you're learning to look at these things. Diversity and variety of nutrients and vegetables is a key. And very often people are like, okay, I'm just gonna eat broccoli and chicken and I'll be good, right? I'm like, no, you have to go to the farmer's market and find what's in season and find those locally sourced fruits and vegetables and really focus on diversity and varieties because that's how you build your healthy microbiome. As you know, your microbiome is the garden within. All these bacteria are thriving on different types of fibers, and if you feel bloated, maybe you need to change the type of fiber that you're eating. So that's a healthier approach to, and also like the soil that we eating, right? I always say like it starts with the humans, but it really begins with the soil that we're consuming and all these vegetables are growing. So my biggest advice is go to the farmer's market, speak to the farmers that are actually growing their fruits and vegetables, ask them for recipes, for inspirations on how to make those foods, especially in the Northeast in Florida, it's a little bit more challenging, but we still got it. And actually, like from my events that you've mentioned, I always donate money. And in my next event, we're donating money to Florida organic growers. I've made it my mission to support organic agriculture in Florida here. So we have the healthiest population here.
So, what is something you would make at one of these dinners
Yeah.
what are the longevity foods that you're feeling
Yeah.
comfortable serving other people? You're like, yes, this is it. These are
Well,
gonna
number one is omega-3, right? You can't go wrong. It's a high protein, usually fish, usually salmon. We have salmon eggs sometimes, like the red caviar we call it. Sometimes we have like cod liver things. Like omega-3 is high in protein, and omega-3 is also one of the most remarkable compounds for anti-inflammatory effects. So that's what I usually serve. Then we serve some probiotics. We serve some either fermented pickles or olives or sauerkraut. And then for fiber, we usually have a salad or some dandelion or greens that I mentioned, right? Or some boiled greens or some vegetables. Like I love asparagus, Brussels sprouts. We love serving like a shaved Brussels sprout salad or spinach, anything like that. Endive is my favorite. Scallions, arugula, all the bitter herbs. And then what else we have? We usually have also like hydration with either green juice or matcha tea. All of those green antioxidants are amazing. And then fiber, probiotics, proteins, and then herbs and spices like turmeric spices, ginger or oregano, thyme, rosemary, all of those, in the blue zones area, people who live to 100 years old, they use those as medications in small amounts, but every day. Like when you go to Greece, they sprinkle those mountain herbs on fresh salads, right? We don't usually think of like dried herbs on fresh salads. Usually it's like for stews or like for soups for something like warmer. No, you can use it on your salads. And then berries for dessert. We usually have the polyphenols rich dark chocolate and berries that everyone loves. That's like sugar-free, but also satisfying. So yeah, that's what we usually serve.
So as we're winding down here, I want to bring it to the real world a little bit
Yeah.
because I think a lot of folks don't want to necessarily they want to live a good life, but not necessarily it's not necessarily deprivationist. I don't want to never eat a slice of cake again. I don't never want to like taste a bite of pasta in my life. So what is the balance between cultivating a healthy gut, but also dealing with some of the realities of our food system, where
Yeah.
sometimes we're gonna only be offered food that's not necessarily gonna grow the garden in the best way. So, like, how do we deal with that, the real
It's
world?
having the tools. It's having the tools in your toolbox. Like, look, life happens, right? We travel, like, and same thing with me, and I teach my clients. I'm very realistic. I call myself a foodie dietitian in my new book called The Foodie Diet because I love eating good food. That's why I became a dietitian, not because I love deprivation and strict dieting. So, for example, when you go out and you overindulge and you eat the sugar-loaded cakes, you can always take some compounds for blood sugar support the next day, like something like with berberine or chromium that helps your insulin to digest all that sugar. Or same thing if you overindulge or if you overeat, you always should have enzymes. Like for example, I mentioned like not someone who is able to tolerate dairy, or my clients that are gluten sensitive, they always carry with them gluten and dairy special enzymes. There's a special blend that I recommend, and doing that could support your body when it's going through some challenges, right? Or some additional, thing, or when we're just overindulging, right? Or we need extra support. Same thing like on the it's all about balance. So for me, if I overindulge the day before, I usually recommend people to either like skip breakfast or have more vegetables have a breakfast salad for breakfast if you didn't have any vegetables for dinner, right? So it's all about, and this is what life is all about. It's never about perfection. It's always about constantly finding a way to bounce right back on, and that's what we want to teach our children. That's not, it's not one way or another. All those restrictive diet that people are on is not a healthy approach to life. And we want to find a way to enjoy, but to support our body with all those nutrients that love our body as much as our body thrives on them.
Oh man, yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's a bit of a stark difference compared to some of the other folks in this field there who eat incredibly healthy, but it's not always attainable to the average person. And, when you go out and still want to socialize and live life and not feel like you are necessarily missing out. That's
Yeah,
a really key factor. And it's something you said at the very beginning of our talk, which is that food is not just like, it's not for eating, but it's also social, it's cultural. So you have
absolutely.
to
Yeah.
enjoy the
I do have
culture.
a few advice. Like if you're going out and you have to dine out, my number one rule is never eat carbohydrates on an empty stomach. Fiber, protein first, and then carbs. That's what helps to slow down the blood sugar absorption. And this way it doesn't trigger your insulin as much. Same thing with alcohol. Never drink on an empty stomach because the ethanol crosses the blood-brain barrier too fast and it creates creates the brain damage. So always eat some food. Usually it's fats, proteins, and fiber, and then drink. And yeah, and find and when you're drinking, you drink water in between because alcohol beverages are very much dehydrating, and very often when we're reaching for another drink, what we really want is more hydration and water. So that's my recommendation. And also avoid late night eating. If you could do all of this, what I just said, like at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed, that would be ideal.
Yeah, that for I think yeah, that's a common thing I've heard as well. And the late night snacking bugs do get me sometimes, but
Yeah.
yeah, that I've heard that is best for digestion and giving your body time to optimize your sleep health.
Yeah, if you want to wake up with the flat belly, full of energy naturally, you want to avoid late night eating because you want to wake up hungry and ready to rock and roll with lots of energy without coffee. Yeah.
Oh man, thank you so much, Ella. This was a fabulous conversation, and I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your knowledge.
Thank you for having me, Erin, and I'm excited for all the beautiful things that you're creating with the Live Long team.
Hey, vice versa with you and your work in gut health as well. It all matters so much. All right. Thank